What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy, Jonathan. Ow! It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. Bow, 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 bow. It's time for a one-off. Yeah, I really like this idea and this writing and this premise, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. I know I say that a lot, where I kind of like hype it up a bit. But this one is one that I thought of and then I forgot about and then I rethought of and then I incorporated some new ideas. And so this one's been sitting in my mind for a while and I got to write it and it makes me want to write more of it. But yeah, let's get into the one-off.
Push and Pull, written by Jonathan Howe, read to you by Brooklyn Howe. Ankyu snuck around the Kayafumi's compound, hoping to find a crack in the defenses. The fortress was as impregnable as it was imposing. The large stone wall towered up at least 80 feet, with parapets reaching 100 feet. Guards patrolled the top of the walls, keeping a close watch on the field below. Ankyu stayed hidden in the small forest outside the field. No openings, she muttered to herself. I guess it means I really do only have one shot. In approximately 20 minutes, Dua was going to give Ankyu the opening of a lifetime. Until then, she prepared herself. She set a large hinod gem at the base of a tree, securing it with straps. Next, she pulled the grapple hook embedded with hinod from her bag, making sure she had enough rope. Finally, she strapped the hinod blades to her waist. Everything with hinod in or on it glowed slightly, but that was a risk she would have to take. With little time remaining, Ankyu knelt in the trees, closing her eyes to pray. Dua, ruler of the night sky, please be with me today. Help me rescue Pei from the Fumi, even if it cost me my life. Ankyu clutched a ring in her hand tightly, the evening hinod pulsing. It was a sign that Dua was with her. Thank you, Ankyu said quietly. When she opened her eyes again, the sky was dim. Ankyu sprung forward. She drew on the power inside her, bestowed by Dua, and pushed off the hinod she'd placed at the base of the tree. Ankyu shot forward, keeping low as she pushed herself through the field. Above, in the afternoon sky, Dua was keeping her promise. The celestial body was distracting the guards and giving Ankyu an opportunity by swallowing the light of Dia. Ankyu wanted to look up, but she didn't have time. Dua's triumph would only last for 20 minutes. She reached the base of the wall and launched the grapple hook up. She pushed it, sending the hook farther than she'd ever been able to throw on her own. It soared up, the rope trailing behind. As Dua swallowed more of Dia's light, Ankyu could feel the strain it took on her body. Her power to push against hinods was weakening. Which is why I'm scaling the wall with a rope, she thought. The manual method. Above, the hook crested the wall and Ankyu stopped pushing on it. The piece dropped, catching on the wall. Hopefully all the guards were too distracted to notice, Ankyu thought. She started the long process of pulling herself up the wall. She'd spent the last month training the muscles needed in an attempt to spend as little time as possible getting up the wall. In the heat of the moment, Ankyu thought she'd just reached a personal best, scaling the wall in under a minute. At the top, she slowed, peeking over to look for guards. The men closest by were fortunately distracted by Dua's triumph. Ankyu slipped onto the wall, snuck to the other side, and dropped one of her sheathed blades off the edge. A moment later, she followed it over. Ankyu fell in the glowing darkness, getting her first look at the inside of the compound. It was a gardened area, full of rare flowers and strange beasts. When she got close to the ground, Ankyu pushed with all her might against the blade. Her fall slowed until she came to a halt feet above the ground. Ankyu stopped pushing, letting herself drop the final space. Her feet crunched against sand, a patch of it against the wall. It had been raked intricately, a design Ankyu was unfortunately forced to mess up. She picked up the blade and stepped as gently as she could, moving towards the building at the center of the compound. It, unlike the wall, was unimposing. A small demure house sat in the center of lush gardens. Based on her research, Ankyu believed it to be the cover for an underground lair. She reached a large rose bush, the final piece of reasonable cover between her and the house. Above, Dua had almost swallowed all the light. While she still had a moment to see, Angyu ran, covering the distance to the house. She flung the door open and ran directly into a large muscular guard. The man grinned maliciously, flinging her back. She could feel her blades being pushed against, meaning she still had some strength left. Angyu tumbled, coming to a stop 30 feet away. She looked back at the house, the shape harder to make out in the growing darkness. "You should not have come, Angyu," a voice called out. It was the confident drawl of the man she hated most. Searching, Angyu found him walking out the front door. He strolled nonchalantly. "You know," Kaya said, "we placed bets on whether or not you'd be stupid enough to try something." "Shut up!" Angyu screamed. She pulled one of the circular blades from its sheath and charged forward. "Ha!" Kaya laughed. "Pei is going to owe me so much." He took a ready stance. When Angyu was close enough, she swung the blade at him, striking for his throat. Kaya avoided the blow easily, stepping to the side. He swung the back of his hand into her gut. She doubled over. "You know, I really would have let her go if you hadn't come," he said smugly. "But I knew that wasn't ever going to happen." "What do you mean?" Angyu growled, picking herself off the ground. "You see, I was so certain you'd try something during Dua's triumph that I made a bet with your sister. If you really didn't try anything, I'd let her go and the wedding would be off." A pit formed in Angyu's stomach. Pei believed you'd honor her word, staying away. Too bad she lost. "What does it matter?" Angyu spat, trying to turn her fear into rage. "I'm just going to beat you and free her." Kaya barked out another laugh. "It means 3 things. Around them was so dark that she could only hear his voice now. Firstly, it means she well and truly lost. Her sister betrayed her wishes, leading to Pei losing the last piece of leverage she had. Angyu took a step back, unable to see. Secondly, you won't be able to rescue her because she isn't here. "Don't lie," Angyu said. "I know your compound is below our feet." "You've done your research," Kaya said, sounding impressed. "True, there is more to this place than meets the eye, but you could search every hall and never find Pei." The pit of fear gnawed on Angyu harder. "And third and finally," Kaya said dramatically, "because she lost, Pei now needs to keep up her side of the bet." "And what's that?" Angyu said weakly. She couldn't see anything now, but she could imagine the horrible victorious look on Kaya's face as he spoke. "Before, I was content to pretend a marriage for the sake of business. Pei was so certain that you'd stay away that she agreed to actually become one of my wives if you tried anything." Angyu's knees shook until her legs gave out. She dropped to the ground, hands shaking. "So this is all my fault," she whispered. "Not everything, up until this point," Kaya said. "I worked too hard for this to let you take all the credit." Above, Dua finished swallowing Dia's light. The excess light spilled out of Dua, creating a ring around her. "But yes," Kaya said, "you are the reason she'll be resigned to this fate." Angyu squeezed her eyes shut, tears of frustration leaking out. She clutched her hair in trembling hands, pulling until it hurt. "Dua," she whispered, "please send me help. I've messed up. Please." The evening hinod pulsed on her finger. Around them, the air whooshed as something fell from above. Off to the side, something crashed into the bushes. "Oh, Dia, that hurts," a male voice groaned. Angyu looked toward the sound. In the sky, Dua was moving away from Dia, allowing his light to reach the world once more. "Men, check that out," Kaya called. His voice wasn't that of the smug victor now. He was genuinely nervous. "Angyu, I don't know what you did, but don't make me kill more than I have to." Angyu started to say, but she cut herself off. She had mere moments to escape, and giving away her location now would worsen the situation. "Hey," the male voice called again. "Can anyone tell me what happened?" "Get out of here," Angyu called out, against her better judgment. It would give herself away, but this was her own stupid fault anyway. "What?" the man asked. "Where is here? Why should I go?" He had a strange accent Angyu had never heard before. "Because you'll get killed. Please, She cut off in a yelp as Kaya found her in the lessening darkness. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head up and placing a blade to her neck. Who are you? Kaya called out. How did you get here? My name's Lavin, the stranger said, and is it good enough of an answer to say I have no idea? No, Kaya spat. In the growing light, they could see the man. He'd crashed into the large rose bush Angu had hidden by earlier. He wore outlandish clothes of a cut she'd never seen or even heard of. The garb was torn from the thorns of the rose bush, and the man bled from a set of cuts. Well then, he said, hands forward placatingly. I think it has to do with Daya's feast. He pointed up at the sky. Angu felt Kaya shift. She made a face as well. The man looked around to all the guards standing around him. Really? You guys just watched Daya feast on Dia's light. What don't you get? Do not profane Dua in such a manner, Kaya yelled. The man looked back to him, seeming to just notice Angu's plight. Did you tell me to run? He asked. She nodded her head barely. His gaze hardened. He reached out a hand, like someone ready to push off a hinod. I don't understand, but I accept, Angu thought, waiting for the blade to cut her throat. Kaya yelped and lurched forward, the blade pulling away from him. He crashed into Angu, the pair sprawling out on the manicured grass. She rolled over, looking up as Levin ran over, extending a hand. In his other hand, he held Kaya's blade. Let's go, he said quickly. She didn't hesitate, taking his hand and pulling herself up. This way, she said, taking off in the direction of her rope. After them, Kaya screamed. Kill the man, but I want Angu myself. What did I fall into? Levin asked between panting breaths as they ran. Long story. Run now. She dropped a glowing hinod from her pocket and pushed off of it, leaping far ahead. Behind her, Lavin stopped, looking at her, jaw slack. What are you waiting for? She yelled back. He shook out of his stupor. The hinod flew from the ground into his hand. He jumped, stretching a hand out forward. Angu felt a tug from her belt, and one of her sheathed blades moved off her belt towards Lavin. The force was too great, and she fell over in his direction. Sorry, he said, running up to her. I don't have a sprint anchor on me, and I didn't know where yours was. How are you doing that? Angu asked, standing up. She looked back toward the men who began chasing them. Doing what? That thing where you pull. Daya's blessing? Lavin said, sounding horribly confused. You've been doing the same thing. No, she said, taking the hinod from his hand and dropping it. I push. She used the hinod to leap another 40 feet away from him. Lavin's eyes went wide. He reached down, picking up the stone. Plant a blade, he yelled. She did as he asked, driving one of her blades into the soft earth. Lavin flew towards it, hands stretching out forward as he pulled himself toward the blade. That's not normal, she said as he came to a stop next to her. He looked back. The men were gaining, having dropped hinods of their own. Above, Dua was almost done. The light was returning to normal. You push, he said as he stuck the hinod into his boot. Then I pull. He gestured to her blade. Angu pushed off the hinod she knew was in his boot, flying 60 feet away. Her pushes grew stronger as Dia's light returned. Immediately on landing, she drove her blade down. Lavin pulled on it, catching up. Repeat until we've gotten away, he said. She didn't wait, pushing off again. The pair kept up the style of movement, easily outpacing Kaya's men. Up ahead, the wall loomed. Angu reached the base first, planting her blade so Lavin could catch up. I assume you can get up easily, he asked. She nodded. I'm going to need you to give me an anchor once you get up there. It's the same as what we've been doing, but up instead of forward. Angu nodded. She dropped one of her blades. The larger hinods embedded in it would give her a more powerful push. She drew on Dua's blessing, leaping up toward the sky. The wall was a blur next to her until she was above it. She dropped another blade on top of the wall, giving herself a place to land. As she fell, trying to push off the blade for her landing, it lurched toward the inner edge of the walkway. The motion threw off her push, almost sending her over the wall's outer edge. It wasn't a graceful landing, but she didn't break anything as she came down hard onto the stone wall. Behind her, Lavin soared up over the edge. He did a sort of flip, landing easily on the wall. You almost messed up my landing, she complained. Sorry, he said. I'm not used to people pushing where I come from. Where is that? She asked. No time, Lavin said, pointing to a host of guards reaching their portion of the wall. He dropped her blade from the base of the wall, off the outer edge. Go. He flung himself off the wall, her blade sliding to the other side of the walkway. What in Dia's light? Angu said. She leapt off the wall where he dropped the blade. At the base of the wall, she slowed her fall until she hovered a few feet off the ground. Lavin was doing something of the opposite. They landed, she picked up her blade and made to push off him. Above, shadows passed by. Wall guards, pushed by their compatriots, flew beyond Angu and Lavin. I hope you know how to fight, she said. The guards charged forward, drawing Hinod-backed swords. Angu lowered into a fighting stance. Here, Lavin said, passing a small bag to her. She gave him a panicked look. Launch these over the men. She opened the bag, dumping a small pile of tiny sharpened Hinod shards into her hand. Oh, Dua, she groaned, realizing what was about to happen. She pushed the Hinods in a spread out beyond the charging men. They stopped for a moment to guard, confused why she deliberately missed. As the shards fell through the air, coming level with the torsos of the men, Lavin pulled. A sickening crunch followed by the slicing and tearing as he pulled the razor-sharp piece of shrapnel through the men. Every single one dropped dead. Let's go, Lavin said. Angu stood, looking around in horror. Lavin placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We need to go. They can and will outnumber us. She nodded, clenching her jaw and looking up deliberately. She ran over to one of their swords, taking it before pushing off another. The jump launched her 100 feet from the massacre. Behind, Lavin took another of the swords before pulling on the blade she planted in the ground. He rocketed to meet her, planting his blade in the ground for her to launch off. Moments later, inside the stand of trees, Angu packed her bags, taking the items she'd left. She handed an extra bag she'd prepared to Lavin. That was meant for my sister, but you might as well take it. He didn't say anything, shouldering the bag. Her things collected, the pair leapt off, putting distance between them and the Kaya Fumi's compound. Angu couldn't stop the tears of shame leaking from her eyes as they left her sister in his hands.
And we're back. My head hurts. My neck is not thrilled with me. So if I look awful, that's because my neck is, I need to take an ibuprofen, drink some water, heat up my neck, and calm down. But I really like this one. I kind of don't want to spoil what the big, mechanical twist of the world is. But it's interesting. I like it. Maybe theorize in the comments, all 12 of you who watch consistently. And then I enjoyed getting to kind of go off of that and make a story and interactions. Ooh. That was a yawn. Make interactions based off of this world mechanic that you don't understand, but I love them learning about this opposite power that Lavin has and being like, that, what? I really do think it's interesting. So, very excited about the future potential of this idea into a book. If I have time, I might start writing that now, because it should be a little bit shorter than some of the other ones I'm considering. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Brooklyn for reading that, because I wanted it to be read by someone who was female. Partially for variety's sake and partially because it is from a woman's perspective, and so, that just helps. But doesn't have to happen like that. I still like it better. So thank you to my wife, who's super cool. Anyway, yeah, I will see you guys next week. Oh, that's the other thing. You guys will be like, but John, the eclipse is next week, not this week. I know. I didn't want to wait. I liked the writing. Plus next week is going to be another one of those busy weeks where I work Tuesday through Saturday. My work does not understand what part-time means. hanging on for dear life. I have like a few more months before I move, maybe, but I don't, it's fine. Anyway, but yeah, share this with your friends, and